as a community. Now, part of this webinar series, like I mentioned, is not only to share information, but to also to get your feedback. And part of that feedback will be asking everyone to complete a post-evaluation. I myself was formerly undocumented. I attended UC Santa Cruz back in 2013 and graduated while I was still undocumented. And it wasn't until I graduated college and I volunteered at a asylum office that I had the opportunity to learn that my family was actually able to legalize their status. And we actually could have had the opportunity to legalize our status years before that. And the reason why we did not take advantage of that opportunity was because we did not have the right information and we did not know that we were actually eligible for an immigration remedy. Which is why I'm very excited that we have Jesus Flores here today. He's our Legal Services Coordinator at Immigrants Rising, who will be sharing with you some of that key information that you can share with the students and families that may potentially be able to legalize their status here in the country and alleviate some of those major concerns. So I'll give Jesus a chance to introduce himself, and then we'll go ahead and share a little bit more about some of the logistics for today.
Yeah, thank you, Rocio, for that really great introduction. So basically, Rocio already mentioned what I do. I'm the Legal Services Coordinator at Immigrants Rising. And a big piece of what I do is I help coordinate and facilitate the Immigration Legal Intake Service, which all of you will be hearing a little bit later in this webinar. But a little bit background about myself is, I grew up undocumented in Los Angeles and eventually found my way to UC Davis, where I was part of the founding staff of the AB 540 and Undocumented Student Center, where I helped coordinate like an outreach program, and et cetera. So all my life, I've been really just dedicating to increasing the resources for undocumented students. And now that I'm interested in law school, I really want to just also expand those resources so they can reach folks that are interested in gaining a legal solution to their paths. So that's kind of, that's what we're going to be talking a little bit more today.
Thank you, Jesus. So some of you might have had the opportunity to participate in our first webinar, which was how educators can help undocumented students pursue college. We had a webinar that was also on financial aid for undocumented students, and we're on our third webinar series. We will then continue with the webinar series throughout the year, and every year we're also going to be continuing to offer new and fresh information as updates continue to come up. Again, we'd like to remind you all that there will be an opportunity for you to receive an UndocuAlly certificate if you complete 5 of the 7 webinars, and if you complete an evaluation for the webinars. Again, those evaluations are very valuable for us to be able to get your insight, your feedback, and how we can continue to improve our resources and continue to broaden our reach when it comes to this content and information, because you all who are doing the on-the-ground work are the experts on how we can reach students and families at the high school level, and be able to really share your commitment to continue to support undocumented students through the learning experience. And now go and share it over with Jesus, who will talk a little bit more about the content of the webinar. If you do have questions throughout the webinar, please use the chat box, and we will be answering the questions throughout.
Yeah, in addition, we will be sharing FAQ, so frequently asked questions document that we have come up with, of just like, frequently asked questions about the service that Immigrants Rising offers that we'll be talking about today, as well as some frequently asked questions about some of the options we'll be talking to. So, feel free to use the chat box and feel free to use the document that we'll be sharing too. All right, so cool. Basically, I'm super excited to be talking about this, legal solutions for undocumented students. It's so important. And basically the purpose of this webinar is we're going to be providing an overview of what the Immigration Legal Intake Service is that, Immigrants Rising offers and what it's not, as well as some resources that are we'll be sharing some resources as to, how can we address the things that Illest is not, as well as, we'll discuss about, the value of why it's so important to get screened, kind of like getting a doctor's checkup. Why is it so important to go see the doctor? Well, in this case, it's very similar. Why is it important to get an immigration screening? And then another one is we'll review some common immigration options for undocumented students, in particular for undocumented high school or middle school students, because some of these options are time sensitive, and I really want you all to, at least one of the things to walk away with is to really get a sense that some of these options are time sensitive. And that's what's so important for all of you to know about these options, especially when you're working with your students and maybe some students might be sharing some sensitive information. It's good for you all to know some of these options. And lastly, we'll be sharing some promotional tools so that you all can share with your students at your classrooms. Awesome. So something that I do want to share and just have you all as a reminder is that you are all trusted people in your community. You are educators. Students might be coming up to you and disclosing some sensitive information. So just remember that you're all trusted people in your community. Second is there's different paths for different statuses. So what this really means is, for example, what if you have like a cousin that's undocumented, but you are a U.S. citizen? Then that path for that undocumented cousin is going to be different than what if, for example, they were a victim of a crime. That path is going to be very different. So that's just like the general sense of the second point. The third one is the immigration status is not always static. And that one also goes paired with like immigration policy is not always static. And what that really means is, some undocumented students might feel overwhelmed about their status. They might be saying, oh, I'm undocumented, I don't think I have a future. Where actually, immigration status can change, and it can change based on your experiences in the US or, your relationship to people in the family. So I will be talking about some of those things. But yeah, I think it's good for people. That also goes coupled together with why it's so important to get screened, because, you never know if one day you might be, unfortunately, like, a survivor of a crime, or, you might go through a particular instance in the US that might potentially make you eligible for an immigration option. And then also part of what I was saying in the beginning, immigration policy changes all the time. So it's good to also get informed about all these policy changes and how it might affect you. And then lastly, some of these options are time sensitive. And, I talked about this earlier, and we'll be talking about some of those pieces. So I won't be talking about those right now. Okay, so basically the Immigration Legal Intake Service, it's a free service. It's an online form that students get to fill out at their computer. They don't have to pay any money to do it. It's also anonymous. So something that we ask students to do is to put in a nickname. So they don't get to put any self-identifying information. The only thing our team is really interested about is what is their immigration background, so that we can really assess what their options are. And so basically they can add a nickname such as, I don't know, Nicki Minaj, or I don't know, anything, Betty Bop. So anything really, that's not the purpose of the intake, for us to really identify them. It's more to really screen their options. And then lastly, it's confidential. So anything that's shared inside, the responses to the intake, the information is not shared outside of the legal services team. So it's kept under a secure lock within the team. We don't really share with any person outside. And then before I go forward with a little bit more information about the legal intake service, as well as some immigration options that might be relevant for your students, I do want to share a testimonial of one of the people that was able to benefit from this option. His name is Julio Navarrete. So hopefully you all can just really gauge some of the importance of this amazing service.
Having a service that is anonymous, confidential, and free, it really gave me the freedom to share a lot of information. Sometimes when you're face to face with an attorney, and again, depending on the questions the attorney is asking, their time is very valuable. So sometimes it's like a 10-15-minute consultation. You don't have a lot of time to share everything, but having submitted the legal intake form, you can get time and you can share perhaps more information that would help to decide whether there is a potential remedy or not. And in the end, there's nothing to lose.
Awesome. All right, so now we will move forward with it. So how does the immigration legal intake service work, right? So there's a link, and it's immigrantsrising.org, legal intake. And what does it ask? Basically, like I mentioned before, the immigration legal intake service asks what your immigration background is, such as, for example, how did you arrive to the US? When did you arrive? You know, basically some questions as to like, what year did you arrive? Do you have DACA? What years did you apply for DACA? When did you renew? All those different things that really help us assess some of the options that the students may have. And then how long does how long does it take to complete the service? So basically, based on how complicated the background is of the student, some students may take up to 30 minutes. Some students may take up to 10 minutes. It really depends on how complicated it is. And basically what the purpose of this form is that at the end, we will be completing, so our team is made up of At the end of the service, we have a team of 4 undocumented fellows, which I think that's also part of like why it's so important. We have a service that's just really unique, and sorry, we're having some technical problems.
Just 1 second.
Okay, so moving forward with this. 1 second, sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, basically, like I was saying, what's really special about this service is that it's for and by undocumented people. So our team is composed of 4 undocumented fellows that are also getting trained about immigration law, immigration policy, and then they're the ones receiving these responses. So once they receive these responses from the community, they're able to really assess some of the options that they have and send it to an attorney who is able to also review these responses and make sure that everything is as accurate as possible before it goes out into the community. But basically, the team comes up with a summary of immigration options. And what's really so special about this too is that we don't only come up with possible immigration options for the community, but we also come up with educational resources. So let's say, you know, because this is a national service and it's not only specific to the Bay Area or to California, it's really cool because let's say, what if we have students from Florida or from like Indiana, and they're interested about what their options are in their area. We're able to really analyze, okay, cool, there's a nonprofit in their area, they can reach out to this legal service provider in their area. So we're really able to personalize that information based on their geographic region too. So now I will go over what is the Illest NUT, right? So the Immigration Legal Intake Service is not a place for legal advice. So we do not provide, so again, this is we provide a summary of immigration information of just things that the community member can move forward and really just get to learn about some of their immigration options based off of the responses they provided for us. But, you know, we're not able to really tell them, oh yeah, you know, these are your options. Okay, how can we move forward with that? That's more for like an attorney to do. And we're more than capable to also connect them to an immigration attorney in their area. So again, this is not a service for legal advice. This is a service for legal information. And then another piece is that it's not a platform for inquiries. So again, because it takes around 2 to 4 weeks for the team to come up with a response, because it has to go through various filters, you know, it's hard if a community member has a question that could easily be addressed easily through an email versus this service, because, you know, we are coming up with responses. Our team really takes good care in providing the most accurate information. But if they have a question that is time sensitive and that could easily be we can easily respond through an email, then, you know, I think it will be better to ask questions through an email versus the service. Third, it's not a rapid response. So for example, what if someone is going through deportation proceedings? Would that be like a place where they can actually come up with they can fill out the response? So I think if someone is going through deportation proceedings, that is something that's more of like a rapid response. They really need someone there on the spot. Again, it's not designed to respond to urgent needs. Again, because it goes through various filters, and, you know, our team really takes great care in providing the right information. So if it's something that's more time sensitive, I think it'll be best to connect with the rapid response team in their area, or, you know, send it through email too. Another one is that someone who is already seeing an attorney. So again, the purpose of the Immigration Legal Intake Service is for someone to get to know what their options are. But if they're already seeing an attorney, then they might already get that information from the attorney that they're seeing. So I guess it'll be more useful for them to really just talk to the attorney rather than completing the service. And again, the purpose of this service too is to connect you with attorneys in your area. So if you're already seeing an attorney, then I guess that's already defeating the purpose. And then lastly, if you want a presentation request, then I guess that's through a different avenue. Again, the purpose of the Immigration Legal Intake Service is to really screen the community members' immigration options. And the other one is, you know, people in the community ask if this service is available in other languages, and, you know, other languages in English. And just because, you know, our team is going through capacity needs and we don't have the capacity right now to really offer this service in other languages, but one of the things that our team, the legal services team right now is doing is, if we have like Spanish speaking people that can only speak Spanish and they complete the form, we're able to really identify that, and in our response, we're able to really put a note in the response and say in Spanish, if you're Spanish speaking, we would offer you a follow-up call. So a phone appointment with one of our people so that they can go over the summary in Spanish and really just give more guidance in Spanish too. So what happens next? So again, I talked about, you know, the service taking 2 to 4 weeks. Again, it takes that time because, you know, once we get a response, our team member really assigns these cases to members of our team who are able to really screen that and it goes through various filters so that the responses can be as accurate as possible. So what happens next? Again, the summary is taken to the local service provider or immigration attorney to explore so our hope is that you go to a legal service provider and really explore your options based on the summary that we provided you. So now at this point, I really want to go over some common legal immigration options for undocumented students. And again, there are many other options that are available. And yeah, so there are many options that are available for undocumented people. But I think at this point for this webinar, I really want to emphasize on some particular ones that are more specific to undocumented high school students and middle school students, and just undocumented young people at this point. Yeah, and okay, so basically, before I do so, I want to go over some just pillars of immigration law that are just so important to just get to know at this point. So for example, there are two main pillars. So there's family-based petitions, and again, this one is based on options, immigration options that are available based on your relationship to people in your family. So for instance, what if you have a US citizen spouse, you're married to a US citizen or lawful permanent resident person, someone that has a green card? Or what if you have a family member, let's say a brother or a sister that is a US citizen or has a green card? Those options are all through family-based petitions. And then the other pillar, the other bigger pillar, is employment-based petitions. And what this really is options that are available based on the skill sets that you bring to the US or your educational background. So these are kind of like the bigger pillars of immigration law. And then there's other ones which are really humanitarian-based petitions, and these are based on your your experiences in the US or your experiences in your home country. And some of these I'm going to be really highlighting are, for example, Asylum, SIJS, which is Special Immigrant Juvenile Status. And surprisingly, Special Immigrant Juvenile Status is an option that most people don't know about. And for the purpose of this webinar, I really, really want to emphasize this one because this is one of the options where students are able to mostly benefit from. So yeah, I really want to emphasize that one and some other ones too. And then another one, two other ones that I really just want to cover are Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, and I think it's really just important to know what this is for educators, just in general. And then there's also Temporary Protective Status for folks that are fleeing their country based on temporary conditions in their home countries. And for DACA, it's for folks that came to the US at a young age. And yeah, it's basically providing some protection for these childhood arrivals, right?
Take some questions. So we'll probably take some moment to look and see if there's any questions that have come up so far before we dive into some of the general questions. And so we'll take a quick moment if you have any questions so far. Take a look at that. So yeah, so we're gonna dive in to talk a little bit more about Illest. So there's a question regarding the language, whether Illest is available in a different language. So please include some of your questions.
I think there's a really good question coming from Amika, where it says, do the family sponsors need to be a certain age for these petitions to happen? And I think that's a really good question. So what this happens, so there's just different options, but for family-based petitions alone, so the petition needs to be from someone that is 21 years or older to be able to really file an application for another family member that's undocumented. So that's a really good question.
So we have some really great questions. So it seems like some of the questions that we have coming in are based on some of the remedies that Jesus will be covering. So we're very happy that you're bringing in this question. So some of the questions that Jesus will keep in mind as he shares some of the detailed information about some of these options.
Yeah, and I think these are really good questions, and a lot of these questions are really it's really exciting because it's really it excites me to just keep moving with this webinar, because we'll be going over with a little bit more detail as to what are these options, right? What these options really are. So again, some of you are asking what the special immigrant juvenile status, SIJS option is about, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that, or whether these pillars, as some of you put it, whether these pillars are really options for students to apply for, right? So I think that'll be more like open for you all to really reflect upon, like based on maybe some of the students that or what the students really share with you all. Is this really an option for them, right? And hopefully at the end of this webinar, you all are able to really share these resources with your students so that we can look at it on our back end and really help assess whether these options are really available for them. So really, really good questions on your end. Keep the questions coming, and hopefully we'll be able to answer those at the end. All right, awesome. So now I want to move forward with another really good testimonial. And actually, Mitsia was one of our former fellows who was one of the people on the back end really assessing what these options are. And I think that she's really able to talk about, through a personal experience, about the impact of someone who filled out the immigration legal intake service. So I'll just go ahead and open it up for you all to see.
For me, I think the piece of advice that I would say is just be completely honest. Some of the things that they ask you are intimate and are very personal, but I feel like if people understood that it's because you want to say, if you answer yes to this question about you being a victim of a crime, it's when we will know whether you qualify for this. And we have to get you on this remedy as soon as possible, because there's a 6 to 10 year wait line, right? I wish someone would have told me to fill this out when I was 18. I think that would have been, and be honest with it, and just be completely honest and not be afraid of like telling people my experiences, because I feel like me being 22 now, I think I would already have U.S. citizenship if I would have been completely honest when I was 18 about my experiences.
Yeah, so I think Mitzi in this case is really talking about, the importance of really getting to know these options, especially when a student is young and they're able to, if you really are able to learn about these options. Some of these options really have age restrictions, so it's so important to know whether the student might be eligible for them as soon as possible.
And especially if there's something that the student might share with you that might trigger or make you reflect on, hey, this student just came to the wellness center and shared this specific incident. This is happening in a specific student's family situation. So again, like making that referral in order to get students to access these resources, because like this was mentioned, you all are a trusted members of the community, especially for the students.
Yeah, and I guess I also want to add that, I really want to encourage you all as I go over these, some of these options, to really identify some of these key, some key terms that, might pop out when a student is sharing some of their background with you all, or, you see some of these things in your own school sites. I really want you all to come up with some identifying terms that might be able to help you in helping a student when, with their options when you really hear these stories from them. So the other one, I want to start with just going over asylum. And asylum is basically an option where it's available for someone that is fleeing their country based on a well-founded fear, based on persecution. They're fleeing their country from fear of persecution based on race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or particular social group. And again, particular social group could be, for example, like if they're fleeing their country because they're LGBT or any other, that could be open up to discussion. And this is, you might notice that a student might be eligible for this option if they're a recent arrival to the US. So that's another big flag for you all to know. And something important that I want you all to know is, at least for this particular option, is that it's time sensitive. So the reason why it's time sensitive is that someone is, able to apply to asylum within 1 year of within 1 year of coming to the U.S. Or if they don't file within that 1 year, if sometimes we might hear students that are, they came 5 years ago or, a couple years later, and they didn't know that this option was available to them. So then in that case, they might have to prove extraordinary circumstance. And in that case, what that really means is, they have to prove, why didn't they apply for asylum in that case? It could be because they didn't have the money. Their fear was so strong, they couldn't really apply for anything. So that could be some of the criteria. But some of the benefits from asylum is, the person that's able to benefit from it can have a pathway to citizenship. They can travel abroad. Derivatives really means people that are able to benefit from the application through this application. So for example, someone in their family, in their immediate family. So if I am a person that's seeking asylum and and I'm married to someone and I have children, then they are able to qualify for this option along with myself. So that's what really derivatives mean. And that's why we put a luggage, because it's someone that you carry with you. And also, again, this goes along with work authorization. So you get a work authorization, social security number, etc.
You might notice that currently there are some high school students that are recently arriving into the country, and there are some other students that we see that might be already going through the process of asylum that just recently arrived to the country.
Yes, very good. And then again, the one that I really want to emphasize is special immigrant juvenile status. And I know some questions were coming from all of you around what this was. So basically, special immigrant juvenile status, I'll just, it's a really long name, so I'll just shorten it up and say SIJS. And basically what this is, it's an option for people, for students or young people that have been abandoned, abused, or neglected by either of their parents. And again, a lot of you might be asking, what does abandonment mean? What does abuse mean, or neglected? Again, that could be opened up to conversation, and again, that could be for like our screening team to really assess whether that option is a qualifying option for SIJS. But again, another piece of eligibility is, this is why it's so important to know about this option early on, specifically for high school students and middle school students, is that if a student has been abandoned, abused, or neglected by either of their parents, it doesn't have to be both. They have to be under 21 in California. And it's very unfortunate because sometimes we get people in California that they could have been eligible for this option, but they didn't find out about it until they were 25 or they were like 30 or 22 even. So that's why it's so important to get to know about this option as early on. And in other states, this option is available for people under 18. And some of the benefits from this option are, it's a pathway to citizenship. You're able to travel abroad, get work authorization. Unfortunately, for this option, you don't get to bring people into your application. So you can't file for the same option for like your parent or for your siblings unless they were, victims of the same abandonment, abuse, or neglect. Unless your siblings were the same, then they can file separate applications, but you can't bring people on into your same application. Some things to consider is that the state court must find that the child's reunification to their home country is not in their best interest, meaning that, if they were to return to their home country, then it's not in their best interest. They will not be like happy, or they won't be safe to return back to their home country either. All right, so now moving forward. So now the next piece is Violence Against Women Act. And this one, again, it's also very important because this one really touches upon what if, one of the students or the family members of the student is going through domestic violence, right? So this one is for survivors of domestic violence. The only limitations about this is that the person committing the abuse has to be a US citizen or a green card holder and a lawful permanent resident, right? And it also has to be the spouse, so someone that the person is married to, the son or daughter, or the parent. So this one is very specific, right? You might be wondering, well, what if like the person that's abusing the family is undocumented, right? So that's also an option for later, and I'll be talking about it. But yeah, so this is part of the eligibility. It's very narrow. So the abuser needs to be a US citizen or green card holder. And again, the deadline, this is why it's also important to know right away, is that the undocumented child needs to be unwed and under 21 and able, as you know, if they want to be able to benefit as a derivative, as someone that's able to file under someone else. And then a spouse, so the person that, you know, let's say if I'm going through domestic violence and, you know, the spouse, I need to be within 2 years divorce, or, you know, if I have been divorced or my spouse died, it has to be within 2 years. So some of the benefits is that it's a pathway to citizenship. You're able to travel abroad. And again, there are derivative options. So you are able to bring people into your application, and that's your spouse and unmarried children under 21. And I do want to say too that, you know, the child that's under 21 can also file for this option separately. They don't need to file under a derivative application, under someone else's application, if that makes sense. And then I will be answering some of these questions a little bit later on. So stay put, but keep them coming. All right, so the next piece is DACA. And again, I'll just, I think at this point, maybe some of us already know what DACA is, but I do want to say, I think at this point, it's a really good reminder to know that DACA is not, you know, something that's considered for financial aid. It's not that. This is something separate. So if you have a student that's undocumented and they're applying for colleges, DACA is something else. If they might be interested in the California Dream Act, which is something that's more related to financial aid. So DACA is not the California Dream Act, and DACA is not a pathway to citizenship or anything like that. DACA is a Band-Aid solution. So basically what it is, and I'll just go over here a little bit. Yeah, so basically what it is it's basically a temporary protection for children that have been, if you look at this, that have come to the US before the age of 16. And again, these are all the eligibility that you can look at. But, you know, it's basically a protection from deportation. And they're able to get work authorization and, you know, just move forward with their lives without having to worry about getting deported. So I won't go too much in depth for that, because I know DACA is, you know, very much circling around in the media, but, you know, you all are more than welcome to ask questions. But I do want to ask, what's the current status of DACA, right? So I do want to mention that people whose DACA expired on or before September 5th of 2016, they can submit a DACA renewal application. And people whose DACA expired before September 5th of 2016, they will have to submit their application as a first time or, you know, initial application. So if you know any students that, you know, they fall within the eligibility of DACA and they might be wondering if DACA is an option for them, then I also want to say that, you know, if they have never applied for DACA, then DACA right now is not an option for them. You know, the agency that covers, you know, they accept these applications, they're not accepting first-time applications. So if someone has not applied for DACA before, then, you know, they can't apply for it as an initial application anymore, unless they have had DACA before. And
again, just to reiterate one more time, is that DACA, Deferred Action with Childhood Rebels, is not needed for students to go to college, and it's not needed for students to apply for state financial aid in California.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Rocio, because Immigrants Rising does offer a really good resource on our website. If you go to resources under immigrantsrising.org, one of our tabs, it's called resources. If you were to go there, there's the in-state tuition tool. And for example, students might be wondering if they're eligible for in-state tuition. So I think that's a really good tool because it really asks you questions and it's able to really assess whether you might be eligible for in-state tuition. So I think that's a really good point too. Awesome. And then I do want to mention too, like you educators might be wondering, or maybe students might be wondering, or their family members, what about like the Supreme Court case, right, around DACA? What happened with that? So the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in November, right? And they can issue a decision basically anytime between January through June. But I do want to add also that the that they're not back in session until January 10th. So I do want to add that. And their year ends at the end of June. So the decision may be sometime between mid-January and end of June. However, it's more likely that the decision will happen, whether they will be, considering whether DACA is considered lawful or not, or whether they want to take it away or not, between April through June, because bigger decisions take, they take longer to discuss and draft, but there are no guarantees, right? So it's more likely. All right, so next steps. So something that I really want to encourage you all to do as part of like next steps for this webinar is refer students at your school to resources like Immigrants Rising's Immigration Legal Intake Service tool. Also review the frequently asked questions, which we will be sharing with you all. And basically what this frequently asked questions document really covers is, questions about what the service is, or whether some of you might be wondering, what does abandonment mean? Does that mean, what if a parent was deported? Is that considered abandonment? All those questions. It really covers some really, really good questions from educators as well. So you might be interested in knowing a little bit more about that. And also, I really hope that you all can direct inquiries to the appropriate resources regarding immigration resources or questions. So for example, if you or any of the students have any questions regarding their immigration options, or they are interested in knowing about immigration information, then you can direct students to me, and I'll be sharing my email at the end of this webinar. But also if they're interested in actually getting legal advice, they can also get, they can reach out to their appropriate legal advice representatives, such as like an immigration attorney. And then also I'll be sharing some immigration legal intake service resource flyers. So for example, we have one that's really that you can post up on your walls in your classroom. And it basically is, promoting what the service is about. And also, we have another one that's really promoting, it breaks down into something that's more visual for the students to see when they're walking down the hallways or when they're walking in your classrooms. They're able to really see what the service is. And it breaks it down into what is it, what can I do, all those different pieces. And then the other piece is we ask you to complete the post-webinar evaluation that will be shared with you all as well. And then we did have a question around what is a U visa? And I didn't really talk about this too much, but this is a really good one too. And this one is basically for folks that have been survivors of a crime in the US. And it's available for people that, again, they were, survivors of a crime, and there's a whole list around what those crimes really are. But some of these options are, some of the benefits of this is that you're able to get work authorization and eventually get US citizenship, right? So this is a pathway to citizenship, and you're able to bring people into your application through a U visa. And some of the very important pieces, and I'll go back to the VAWA information, which is why it's so important, is, you know, again, I talked about how narrow it is, right? So if you have been a victim of domestic violence and the abuser is a US citizen or a green card holder, right? Well, you might be wondering, what if the abuser is not a US citizen or a green card holder? What if they're undocumented, right? So thankfully, under U visa, one of the qualifying crimes is domestic violence. So thankfully, that's also an option for survivors of domestic violence. They could apply for the U visa because the immigration status does not matter of the abuser, the person committing the crime, it does not matter. Because if you think about it, does it make sense if, let's say, someone is assaulted in the street, they won't be like asking them, oh, and by the way, what's your immigration status? You know, that doesn't make any sense because it's impossible to really know. So that's a really good question.
And the one thing that I also like to bring up regarding the U visa, which, like Jesus mentioned, the person committing the crime does not have to be a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident. It's also important that people need to report crimes to the police and have a police report. So that is one thing that is necessary for people to be able to apply for the U visa, having a police report. So it's also really important to create a culture in your schools, in your community, with parents and students, that if there are incidents that are happening, to report those crimes, because not reporting can potentially lead to missing out on an opportunity to legalize their status because they did not have a police report.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I also want to follow up with that which is, you know, what if the person reports a crime? There's also another layer, which is, you know, was a crime properly reported, right? So it's also good to keep your police departments also accountable by going into the police department once the report was made and ask for the report and ask to read it, because, you know, eventually you will need it. If you do want to apply for the U visa, you will need the report, but it's also good to read it to make sure that the facts are correct. Sometimes police officers, you know, they're pretty busy people, but also they might not really accurately report the crime, or they might make it not look as critical as it was at the time. So that's why it's so important to keep them accountable and make sure that the facts are correct. Very good. All right. So now I wanted to open up to questions. So I do see some questions that are here. And one question is, do the family-based petitions, so again, the applications that are filed based on, you know, your relationship to people in the family, do they have to have a, you know, a financial minimum, like a money minimum? And this is a really good question, and that's why a lot of people that are, you know, getting these applications, they need a sponsor. So because it's so, the money that they ask, they do ask like the applicants to have a certain amount as a minimum. That's why you hear about some people getting sponsored by others to meet the needs of that minimum. And again, you might be asking if you know anyone that is eligible for this particular option. I think this is a really good question to ask the attorney too. And then I did get, let's see. We got asked some questions about the special immigrant juvenile status question. So that's very good. We already covered that. All right. And again, we did get asked a question around the parent, right? If there are any options for the parent. And I think this is also a very good question, because there are options available for the parent. For example, what if, and I'm gonna go more into, you know, family-based applications, right? Based on your relationship to people in the family. What if, for example, you know, you are, you know, one of the parents has a student that is a US citizen, and, you know, for example, right now they're a high school student and they're interested to know what their options are in the future. So I think it's really good to know, because, you know, they would have to wait until the student turns 21 to be able to file an application. So that's really good. And then again, that's where the attorney comes in, where they can share the intricacies of what the process really looks like, because sometimes, you know, the purpose of this webinar is not really to go over, I don't want you all to really become legal experts, but I really want you all to know some common identifying terms so you're able to really direct the student to the right resource, right? Such as the screening service that we offer. But yeah, there are a lot of intricacies to a lot of these options. So it's not as like, you know, white or black. I think there's a lot more to these options, but I think it's more for you all to really identify what these are. Does Immigrants Rising, so we did get another question from Jessica, which asks, does Immigrants Rising provide financial support for DACA renewals? Rocio, do you want to expand more on that?
Yes, so we currently do not have financial support for DACA renewals in terms of our organization. There are organizations, for example, United We Dream does have resources and information for people to be able to access organizations that are offering financial support, and we can go ahead and share some of the organizations and people who are offering support for DACA renewals. And it is one of those things that is really in high demand, considering that we are asking people, and this goes along with the other one question, which is in terms of asking people to renew for their DACA. It is in high demand because we are asking people who do have DACA to renew, so that even if they renewed last year, so that when they do a renewal, they can have the work authorization again for 2 more years, which will eventually give them 1 more year with DACA status. So again, we are encouraging people to renew their DACAs. The other question that came up is, what are some of the options for graduate college students in terms of any pathways?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question. And I think for this webinar, I didn't really cover employment-based petitions, but let's say you're a graduate student, there are potential pathways based on your, academic background or your professional expertise that, might be of deficit in the country, and the country might need more of that. So again, there are employment-based petitions based on, again, your academic background or your particular professional expertise that you bring into the country. And again, if you are interested, or if you are thinking of someone that could fall under that category as well, we encourage them to fill out the service so we can give them a more detailed response. And again, I do want to go over the previous question that was around DACA renewals. I am sharing, let me see if I can go to the next slide. Oops, yeah, so this slide, basically the California Department of Social Services has a list of organizations that provides DACA renewals. So actually fee assistance for DACA as well as legal support. So you can also look at those and look at the resources that are available through there.
Before they're 21. So then there's a question regarding family petitions. So the question is, can someone petition for, I'm assuming this will be like a family member, parent, sibling. If let's say I'm under 21 and I'm a citizen, can I petition under the age of 21 for a parent or relative?
Yeah, I think it's, currently under the Immigration Nationality Act. It's not that's not an option for someone that is under 21 and they're a U.S. citizen or green card holder. That's not an option. For the moment, it's for folks that are over 21. They're 21 and over, then that is an option. But currently, there's none for people that are under that age, unfortunately. Any other questions coming? Let's see. Keep them coming. And again, I just want to put this testimonial of Krishna Avila while we're waiting for some questions. And I think it's a really powerful one because, you know, Krishna was able to be legal service. He, you know, he used to do my previous position, and now he's an immigration attorney. So Krishna has an amazing story where, you know, he grew up undocumented, and based on the response that he got through the immigration legal intake service, that really opened his eyes to the possibility of really adjusting status. And now he's an immigration attorney. So that's pretty cool. All right, so we have,
again, we have the list of resources, and we will be sharing this links in a follow-up email that we're going to be sharing with you all, including an FAQ with information about the legal intake service and some resources that can be shared. And once again, we don't offer direct support, but we do, like Jesus mentioned, offer the service via the legal intake service for students to be able to access. And there are experts doing behind this work, who are credible and trusted members of the community as well.
Yeah, and you know, if you're an educator in California and if you have knowledge of any family or student that is going through deportation proceedings, I really encourage you all to go to the website. If you can just Google California Rapid Response Teams, it gives you the contact information of teams that can really support those people in those critical situations, as well as I really want to also cover the, you know, what if a student needs legal advice right now and they know what their options are, then, you know, how can they find an attorney in their area? If they go to immigrationlawhelp.org, it's one of the links included in the slide. If they go to immigrationlawhelp.org, they're able to really just put in their zip code, and it gives you a list of organizations based on your area and area that you're interested in getting help on. So for example, if you're interested in a DACA renewal, or if you're interested in really going forward with the VAWA application, Violence Against Women Act, or a U visa, then all these, the list of immigration service providers are, you know, right there, and there it really gives you a description of all those things. Cool. And then we did get another question that asks, where is our main office located? Where our organization is based off in the Bay Area and in San Francisco.
And now to wrap it up, I wanted to remind you all that we are going to be continuing with the webinar series. We do want to encourage you all to complete a post-evaluation so that we can get some of the questions that you might have following this webinar. So now that you have some of the basics of some of those potential remedies, you might be wondering, hey, actually there is this one specific situation and I would like to get connected to some resources. So it's really important for us to get some of those questions to continue to improve some of that content in our presentations and our resources. So please scan the QR code, or you can also check out tinyurl.com/UndocuLegalService to complete an evaluation. Again, your evaluation will inform us about your participation in this training module and will help us keep track of those of you who are engaging and participating with us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And again, we encourage you all to really refer students to this service, amazing service. And yeah, thank you, everyone, for participating in this webinar.
Thank you.